Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. In this video, I'm going to talk about Casper, what I believe it's doing, and where I believe it's heading next. So buckle up. This is going to be an exciting video. Let's dive in. So where I'd like to start is at the very beginning of the Casper chart. Now, this is not TradingView. I'm using charts.cointrader.pro. I have the Casper chart, I have it on an hour candle, and I'm going all the way back to the beginning, which starts April 8th, 2021. If we were to use TradingView, we can see that the chart begins, this is on a 4-hour candle, it begins May 11th, 2021. Well, that is over here. So TradingView starts with this decline right here, and this takes place May 11th, 2021. So what I want to focus on is this area before this decline. And the reason why is it's this area that contains a repetitive structure that today's Casper is following. I'll show you where we are in a little bit on this repetitive structure. But for those of you who are new, I'll show you the basic pattern that this chart follows. Okay, so here we are zoomed in a little more. So it starts with a move up. Now, this move up is the same as this move up, and believe it or not, it's the same as this giant move up over here. These are bull run structures. They are repetitive. It's the same structure that plays out. So it's played out 3 times already. After that move up, it pulls back and does this next fractal. I call this a topping structure. Price kind of undulates and then it breaks to the downside. Once it reaches a bottom, it has this little bounce here. That's one of the defining features on this fractal right here where it breaks to the downside. After that, it moves back up, pulls back, moves back up again, and winds its way down to a point before moving into the next fractal of this sideways range-bound time. So starting here, it's a sideways range-bound time. So once it enters this fractal, which is the second fractal of this sideways range-bound time, price moves up, it drops, kind of goes flat, moves up again, and then it winds its way down, or winds its way across to a point and then drops. After that drop, it goes into the final fractal of this range-bound time, and that is a bounce. Once this bounce completes, it repeats all over again. So the move up begins. This is a bull run structure. So after this move up, it retreats. This time, this topping structure was quite a bit further down than this time. But it does the same basic principle. It undulates and breaks to the downside. Once it reaches a bottom, it does a bounce. We see that bounce took place over here. Of course, this time it repeated on a much larger scale, which brings up an important point. So when these structures, when these fractals repeat, the timing, height, and depth, that's always going to be unique and original. So the basic idea copies over, but how it's expressed with the height of it, the timing of it, and the depth of it is going to be unique, which makes for novelty when these structures repeat. So that brings up another key point. When they repeat, they're always going to look unique. They're going to look original, even though they repeat the same basic concept, the same basic idea. So after this bottoms out, it moves up, and here we had a much larger move up. It took longer for this move up and move back down to materialize. This time it was just a simple move up in one candle and move back down, and then moves back up again, drops in the same way that this moves up again and drops. So after that drop, it goes sideways, whereas this one went sideways but just angled down a little bit. So it comes to the end of this fractal, it moves back up, drops, goes sideways, moves back up again, and creates this same bowl type structure that we see here. It repeats once again over here. This time around, we see a little more definition of this sideways part. It's actually a series of waves. Now, all this repeats on today's Casper again. Well, when I say today, it was quite a bit in the past, but you can see it on TradingView. I'm not going to go into that part of the chart. I'm just getting you familiar with the basic repetitive nature of this overall repeating structure. So after that bowl type structure, it winds its way down to a point. This one went kind of flat and then dropped, whereas this one just kind of winded its way down without dropping. So once it reaches that point, it moves back up again and does this bounce, just like we had over here, the bounce. Now, notice they do the same functions. We're talking about functions here. We're not comparing how identical it looks, but they do look similar because they're repeating the same functions. So this is a study of the functions of fractals. In my type of analysis, these fractals have predictable functions. They repeat predictably one after another. So I can predict what structures are coming down the pike. Now, I don't know how they will look. I don't know how high they will be. I don't know how long it will take to play out. I don't know the height, the depth, anything like that. That's all unpredictable for me. But what I can predict is the basic season, if you will, that the chart will go into. So after this bounce comes the beginning part of the bull run. So we have two examples of this. When this one started, it started after this and this. So these two green boxes are the same idea, just printed differently. So what are these basic functions that this beginning part of the bull run structure does? Well, it moves up, that's obvious, but there's more to it. The way I break it down is there's this first initial wave, I call it a wave, it then moves up into the second wave, and then finally the third wave, and then after that it moves out of this first structure. If we zoom in over here to this iteration of it, now this one happened on a very small scale. I'm on a 5-minute candle here. So price moves up from the end of the bounce. Now this is the first wave, it moves up into the second wave, and then finally comes to a peak in the third wave. However, what's different about this one is it crashes all the way back down into wave 1 zone. After which it does this kind of flat, bouncy, wavy area here, and then it starts moving up. So while these two have some differences, they repeat the same basic idea, and that's the 3 waves up to a peak. Here it held its ground, it didn't drop, whereas this one did drop into wave 1 zone. So now that you understand this basic concept, let's jump to today's chart and examine what is going on today's chart. So it is my belief, just really quick before we go there, that we are in the process of the bounce before the bull run. Let me show you how this fractal here is comparing to what's happening on today's chart. So bam, here we go. Now this fractal has been taking a very, very long time to play out. And at the beginning, actually for many, many months, I thought that this part right here was this because it resembled it. So I thought this was the bounce before the bull run, and then this with its move up here is similar to this first wave, this second wave, which is similar to this second wave, and the third wave, which comes to a peak, drop down into the first wave zone, which is what this fractal does. It comes to a peak, drops down into the first wave zone. However, as this continued to play out, it began to deviate more and more. And even compared to this fractal, it looks different. This fractal does not have these large peaks that today's chart did. However, as it played out over the months, it began to deviate more and more from what this should be doing and began to conform to what this bounce does. So as you can see, even with the deviations, the move up on today's chart with these 2 peaks was much higher than anything that this fractal did. However, the echoes of it are there. For instance, this part right here is just maybe today very exaggerated with this. Remember, the timing, height, and depth is going to be different. Once it gets out of these 2 very intense peaks, it begins to resemble what the fractal does closer. So we see that it comes to a point, it begins its decline, and the timing of this is a little different. So we even have this flared out part. It then goes to this smaller bounce right here, and then this swoop down, and that is what we are in the middle of doing. I don't know if it's going to go any lower than this. It could drop lower, but as you can see, it's beginning to resemble the termination point of this fractal. So it is my belief that we are at or near the bottom of this greater bounce. So what comes next? Well, after this bounce is the first structure of the greater bull run structure. Now, I don't know if it's going to do this. This went to $40. These ones, of course, went much lower. So I don't know the timing, height, or depth of future structures. I just know that this structure, whether it's this one or this one, that is this one, come next once this completes. And I believe we are near the end, at least it's looking like that as of now, near the end of this bounce. Right now, Casper just seems like a terrible coin. It's in the gutter. The sentiment around this coin is just in the trash can right now. And that's exactly what you would expect at this type of termination of this sideways range-bound time where it drops real low like this. This time it didn't do it over here, but this time, the second time it pulled off this bounce, it did drop very low, which is what we're seeing on today's chart. So the sentiment, in my opinion, is exactly where it should be at this point in the chart. It's in the trash can, and it is near this point where things begin to turn around. At some point, Casper is going to begin to move up, and it's going to embark on this next structure. It is my belief that we have exciting days ahead. I'm so glad you watched this video. I hope this video was helpful. If you did find it helpful, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. And by the way, I have a Patreon page where I have a series of videos on the Casper bull run structure. I deep dive into this structure. If it's something that you're interested in, you're welcome to join. It's a $5 a month subscription. The main thing about my Patreon is actually the Discord that's connected to it. I am active on there, so if you want to interact with me, that is the best way to do it. I'll put the link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. This is not financial advice. If you're not yet a subscriber, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.